Hola, buenas tardes a todas, a todos los que estén viendo este programa en vivo o quienes estén viendo la repetición. Me da muchísimo gusto poder saludarles. Yo soy Antonio López, cofundador y director de VUCA. VUCA, como ustedes saben, es una agencia que se encarga de apoyar a los líderes de recursos humanos a volverse más experienciales, centrados en las personas, intencionales e implementar modelos de experiencia del empleado a través de innovación y de design thinking. Hoy particularmente es un día especial porque hablaremos justo del diseño de culturas, que es un aspecto que nos apasiona mucho, que nos interesa mucho posicionar en VUCA, del diseño de culturas centradas en las personas y en los empleados en estos tiempos VUCA, en estos tiempos de tanto cambio. Y además, para honrar nuestro propio nombre, es la primera vez que vamos a hacer un Mezcal Sessions en inglés. Para eso nos va a acompañar el día de hoy Steve Chaparro desde California. Steve es cofundador de Culture Design Studio. Él habla español porque ya estuvo en nuestro podcast en español y ahora en un acto de reciprocidad nosotros empezaremos a hablar en este programa en inglés, también para llegar a otros espacios, y también me acompañará mi hermano y mi co-founder Alejandro en este mismo espacio. Pero si me lo permiten, cambiaremos a inglés para que Steve pueda sentirse como en casa. Welcome, Steve. It's great to have you here. I hope you're having a mezcal or something similar this evening. And yeah, some wine. Well, salud from Mexico. And how are you doing?
Good. Thank you, Antonio, and thank you, Alejandro. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you on this. It's an honor to be your first English guest on the show. So thank you so much. I've had a wonderful time. And so it's been great, Antonio, for us to be able to maintain contact since we first made touch. I think it was probably in November of 2019. We met when I went to go Mexico City in 2020, not knowing what was going to happen for the following year and a half. But here we are, and I'm so thankful to both you and Alejandro for continuing in this cause of championing culture and employee experience. So thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, we first met on, as you said, you were facilitating some workshops here in Mexico City, and we met in Polanco. And it was really kind of you for, taking the initiative for a meeting and with me and getting to know what we are doing. And then for being on our podcast. So it's really great to have you now on this new space that we are trying to move around the topics of culture, innovation, and just having a great conversation with good friends on a Friday evening, having mezcal or something else.
Yes, so it's great to meet you too, Alejandro. I know that when I think we first connected, I wasn't sure if I was seeing double. I just saw the names were different. The pictures looked exactly the same. Now both of your hair is a little different, and I think you changed up your design a bit since I first saw the images. So it's very, very great to meet you.
Yeah, thank you. Since it's very common. It's a very common thing that when some people meet Antonio or me, for example, in LinkedIn now, our avatar, our photos there in LinkedIn are very similar because we are wearing both like blue shirt, and okay, our faces are very similar, but thank you. It's very common, and it's an honor to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, so we use this space for chatting around some interesting topics. Maybe sometimes we find an article, sometimes we find some interesting news about the corporate world and how that affects or impacts the culture or the employee experience in general. And today we found an article around the topic of family-friendly cultures. We believe that over the last couple of months, over the last 14, 15 months, we've been locked down, and some companies have had to adapt their cultures to be more open, to be more inclusive. We have had to pivot from the work-life balance concept to a more work-life integration concept, something that I really likes. I really like that more. But we also discovered this article, and some of the more important things that this article is saying is that the companies that have a thriving culture in terms of how friendly they are for their families are the ones who already had some initiatives and who were more open to listening in a more intentional way to their employees, and for example, identifying what the employee actually wants in terms of their culture. So I think this is a good article and a great topic, and I know you are very not only passionate about this topic, but also very well prepared on these kind of topics, and in terms of culture design and employee experience. So first of all, I would like to ask about your opinion on this article. By the way, Alejandro is putting the article on the screen, and we will share with you the link as well so you can read it. But Steve, why don't you start by telling us what's your take on this?
Yeah, I thank you for sharing this article with me. I think in reading it, I think there were a lot of really interesting things that came out of it. And many of the things, I don't know that there was any one thing that I disagreed with. And I think what was very interesting, as you mentioned, even as we were chatting before the call, was the idea that those who thrived best in moving towards a family friendly culture were those who had already made the decision to do so prior to the pandemic. And so they were very interested in, as you said, listening to the employee, trying to understand what did they want, with the intention of creating the best environment for them to do their best work. And they were already exploring what does it look like to have a flexible schedule. What does it look like for them to possibly have no meetings in the afternoons while kids are coming off of school? Or how do they outfit their office, their home office, in a way that is conducive? And I think if it's those companies that were already thinking about that and already doing that, it shows me that there was already a big intention. So they were responding to the employees as opposed to reacting to the pandemic. And so I think that's a very interesting thing, that there was intention, which for me, design is all about intentionality.
Sure.
And some people may say, well, I'm not a designer. Well, can you designate something? Can you designate that this is the way this is going to be and that's going to be? And I think you're making choices. Design is all about making choices. If you can designate a choice to one particular thing, you can have intention with what you do in any respective area. So that was one thing that really stood out for me, as we all shared early on, was those companies that were already showing intention, already understanding that they wanted to create the best environment for their employees. So that was one thing initially that really stood out to me. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that part of it as well.
What about you, Ale? What do you think when you read this article?
Yeah, this is a great article. Just as Steve says, it's difficult to find something to, not to agree with this article. I would like to, to put or to make a double click in some of these articles' ideas. For example, it shows tells some four. I mean, there are four stories about four different experiences or workers or employees stories about how their companies have been dealing with this, lockdown and going to remote modes or work modes. So it was very nice for me that identifying a match between the different levels or different types of human centricity that the article has been pointing with these three levels of employee experience which are described by Jacob Morgan in his book. The technological environment, the the physical environment and the cultural environment. And the stories shows the story show the different cases and different examples in these three levels. For example, they have develop and adopt different technology in order to make the life easier to their employees, and they have launched some some polls in order to identify what kind of devices and what kind of furniture the employees are needing in their homes. And the main topic for me is culture, right? This is a culture design talk. So what kind of leadership is need to be developed in the in the different levels, hierarchical levels of the organization, in order to work with or to make the life easier to the employees to go remotely. So this is a very nice article, and I don't know if you want to start talking about one of these different environments and so on about experience.
So for me, the most important part, it's always culture. Like culture touches every single thing, because maybe you can have, for example, in this case, they gave allowances to their employees for adapting their home offices right when the pandemic started, right? But that also impacts a lot on how the work is done and how the collaboration is designed in order to meet employees' expectations. So I believe culture touches every touch point on a journey or on any interaction between the company and the employee. And I also wanted to say that these cultures, like the ones that are thriving or that were thriving at the moment, suddenly they became like the gold standard for the rest of the companies, right?
Right. Yeah.
So many companies have to adapt really fast to be more competitive, to be more engaging with their people, and but it requires a lot of effort, I believe, and I would like to hear your opinions on this. It requires a huge effort on designing the job, or designing the workflow, or designing the work environment and the culture. For example, some companies we know and we have worked with, they already have really sophisticated technological tools, for example, for distributed and asynchronous work. Some other companies only have, Google Drive or Microsoft Drive or whatever, and they can rely on these tools for generating and working on a more distributed way. So they don't have to rely on face-to-face interaction, even if it's online. They can trust on what people do, and that they will, perform at their best level, regardless of where they are, or regardless of if they are connected 24/7 in front of a computer. And some other companies have been doing the exact opposite thing. Like they are still, collaborating in the same typical ways that we were used to collaborate. But now they are doing it online. So instead of meetings all day long from 9 to 5 physically, now they are having meetings, virtual meetings all day long from 9 to 5. And that it resonates with me a lot with the topic of culture, because culture, it's like the cornerstone on which you stand to develop the whole working environment, and all the other aspects of the employee experience model, all the other environments of the employee experience model. I don't know what do you think, Steve?
Yeah, it's been very interesting to walk alongside some very large companies during this time as they are experiencing this digital transformation. I think we all know Jacob Morgan, and when he talks about the employee experience, he talks about three environments. He talks about the cultural environment, the technical or tech environment, and the physical environment, which in our case is both physical, probably, and digital. Yeah. And I think some of the things that I've seen is there have been some tools that are available and maybe are even being used by companies during this time. And in some cases, individuals, they're so enabled to do work. This is one interesting thing. They're so enabled to do work well that once they catch on and are able to use these tools, like if it's if it's a virtual collaboration tool like Miro. Now they're able to work very much synchronously as well as asynchronously, but they're also working more than they probably did even before the pandemic, because the lines of their day, when they get to the office, when they leave to the office, has been blurred, because now their days are longer, and sometimes they have meeting after meeting after meeting in ways that were probably not even existing before. And so one of the things that I saw that was mentioned in the article was about not having those afternoon meetings. Yeah. But in some cases, I'm seeing companies saying we're not going to have any Friday meetings. So it's like a no meeting Friday, which is an even more interesting thing, to say we need some time to actually do work because we're meeting so much. And that culture, I think that if they are intentional about things, they will also have a stronger ability to listen to when new problems arise, like saying their workday now is extending longer, or yes, they're able to do work well when they're on their own in their home, but now they're missing the connection that they had before. So before they could have lunch and learns in the office, which was a way for people to get together. Well, can they still do that? And so not trying to necessarily duplicate the in-office experience, but maybe look at what is the intent of that type of experience, and then kind of putting a new package on it. Have been some really interesting things that I've seen with companies, but definitely that being family friendly is an interesting thing to think about, because that's some of those things you can't control.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would like to talk about these four strengths that the article identifies, because the very first strength is one that Steve has already pointed out, is that this listening capacity, listening skill. They know how to listen to what employees need, and when we work, in these design thinking frameworks and methodologies, we learn how important could listening be. So what do you think about this? I mean, how prepared are the companies in order to listen and to listen well their employees? I know that it's a typical, it's a tradition almost to have this annual or periodical, polls, internal polls, in order to identify some topics about culture and environment and so on. But how much these tools, these methods, these techniques make the organization skilled enough in order to listen well their employees?
Yeah, I don't think there's any one silver bullet about how a company can listen to what the employees need and or what they want. I think sometimes we try to say, where's that silver bullet? Can I have some type of survey software or analytics where I can put out 2 major surveys a year and then maybe some pulse surveys? Those are fantastic. Those are really good, but they don't tell the whole story. I definitely have seen companies that have done that well, in terms of, maybe 3 months into the pandemic, they sent out a survey, and then 6 months later at month 9, they sent out another one, just to kind of see how some of those opinions and needs and wants are being addressed. But quantitative listening can never be the only thing that people do. They need to also have qualitative, and that is whether they meet as teams, they meet one-on-one, or they have listening sessions that are kind of like these design thinking sessions, where by listening, it means that the leaders need to stop talking and actually, rather than becoming what I call many times an architect of vision or an architect of culture, because I come from the world of architecture, so I like that idea, but I also know the failings of that approach. Because when you're when you take the approach of a mindset, the architect is going to determine the solution. So if you move from being an architect of culture to becoming a facilitator of culture, then what you're doing is you're using a framework. You're like designing a conversation. And what a leader needs to really be good at is to design the right questions to ask. And I think many times some of these surveys, even 3 months into the pandemic, those were good, solid approaches, but they may not have even known what were the right questions to ask.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead and finish your idea.
no, and I think so. Them learning what questions to ask, how to facilitate interaction where they get feedback from people in those co-creation sessions, so that people can give them. I'll say this one last thing before I pass it over to you, Antonio. I remember one of my famous quotes from the French physician who invented the stethoscope. And he was teaching his doctoral students, his medical students. And he told them this: listen to your patients. They're telling you how to heal them.
Okay.
I think that's such a powerful application when you think of it as leaders. Listen to your employees. They're telling you how to lead them. But you have to listen. You have to listen to what they need and want.
Yeah, for sure.
Great.
I love what you're saying, because lately I have listened about some of these pulses on surveys, and all of them are really good on telling you what you want to hear, like on what you think that it's important for the company as HR professional or as a leader, but not what they really want to tell you. So that was actually one of the follow up, uh, questions or conversations I wanted us to have on how to develop this, listening mindset or listening habit within teams, because it's not that you don't want to listen, it's that you have, like, you are working apart from each other. Maybe before you had, like the spontaneous interaction with one another. You're working in a remote environment. Then you have to deal in some extent with all the roles that you are having around you. No, so sometimes, as you were seeing when we started the conversation, my children were here and they are, like, jumping in every time, and then I just want to get things done so I can get out of the call and deal with the rest of my things. So you're not as wide open as you were in the physical space.
Yeah.
And then and still that you don't have these rituals for listening, for actively listening. So I would like to ask you both on how you can promote this. I would say it's like a muscle, like an ability that you have to train in order to be more prone to listening actually what people want.
Alejandro.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's something about work very healthy on build share values and share understandings, build trust as well. Maybe it's something about have some shift mindsets in the leadership team, for example. And of course, to be very intentional in order to design all of this, this experience, this very relevant touch point and touch point experience that the employees are having, and try. Yeah, it's like a muscle work, right? So it's I think it's very easy, and at the same time it's very hard because it has to do a lot with the mindset shifts, and the mindset shifts are very hard to have, right?
Yeah, I think leaders are so used to coming up with answers. That's their job. Many times that's how they got into their roles, is by having the right answers. And I think more and more because of VUCA, I think it's less and less easy for leaders to have the right answer, because they haven't, like, how many leaders in the world, let's just put it this way, how many leaders in the world have ever led through a pandemic? No one has. Do they have experience leading in this type of world? No, they haven't. None of us have. And that was a perspective that my sister shared with me, because she's a therapist and she's counseling many of these high performing leaders, and they're asking her, how do I get through this? And she was very frank. She says, I don't know. I'm learning myself. Let's learn together. And I think that type of vulnerability, even coming from a leader, to say, I don't have the right answers. I may not even have the right questions. And asking people, what questions should I be asking? And even if that's a one-on-one question with one of your direct reports or as a whole team, I'm not sure that I know what the questions are, let alone the answers. What are questions that I haven't asked? Like sometimes I'll do that in interviews on the podcast. Like, is there a question that I haven't asked you that we should be talking about today? Because there might be some nuggets of wisdom, of insights that they may have that won't come out unless I open the door for them to do that. And if I rely on my ability to ask all of the right questions, it won't happen. And I think it's putting yourself. It is a mindset. It is a posture of saying, I've never been through this before. I want to listen. Let me know what are the right questions, and let's maybe even what are some of the right solutions. And I think having this co-creative mindset of arriving at those solutions is so important, but it is something that leaders are not used to. It is so hard for many leaders.
Yeah, you know that one of our favorite leadership books are these Francesca Gino's Rebel Talent. One of the main skills Francesca, points out about talking about when she talks about leadership is curiosity, right? This skill to be always open and being curious about what the other people need. But I think that a second step, when you have developed this Socratic mindset, I would like to call it, is to have some kind of methodologies in order to, or will let you know how to experiment, right? Because experiments are very important nowadays, because you need to have in a controlled environment the chance to fail quickly and to fail in a safety way. So experiment and design are very important. And I don't know if leaders are also prepared or ready to give the teams and employees the chance to experiment and to do all of these things.
Right. That's actually something that Antonio, you asked about the book that I'm writing right now, that I'm beginning to write, and it's really a lot of what we're going to get into is how do you use the framework of design thinking to help leaders be able to listen and communicate better, how to create stronger cultures, and how to co-create. So those are definitely some of the things that we're going to be delving into, because they don't have a framework. And I think too many times those of us that are in this space of either culture design, organization design, or employee experience, we're used to thinking of things as a framework, as a systematic way of solving complex problems, right? That's design thinking. And so we love our buzzwords. We love the empathy mapping. We love the customer experience or the employee journey map. All of these things. And I think for us is we need to adapt our language to the language that leaders understand, and not even talk about design thinking. Just demonstrate it to them. Just walk them through that, and be able and so you are doing design thinking, but you're not necessarily saying you are. So it's really more about doing, right? When we talk about design thinking, it's more about doing than about telling, or about. So I think some of those things are really interesting to talk about. But it is, it's a muscle that needs to be exercised.
Yeah, I like what you're saying, because immediately it doesn't resonate with HR people, for example, to talk about these approaches or these methodologies on having very well structured workshops in which people will think out their minds, and but if you show them that instead of not listening, not thriving, even failing in creating an inclusive culture, then you can just do it by following not a step by step-by-step approach, but more like a mindset around actively listening people and understanding what they need. And I would also like to point on other of the of the strengths that the article mentions, which are like respecting the roles that every people have. And on that regard, I've been looking at some companies that in the pursuit of the second strength, which is generating a community, they are giving a lot of weight on generating community by promoting activities and interactions that actually damage the third strength, that is respecting the roles that everybody has. So for example, some companies are promoting virtual beers, or yoga virtual retreats, or maybe these launch and learns that this company was having, but they are not respecting the other rules that people have in their own households. So you need to balance all of this, but again, all of this falls from actively listening what they have to do. So if you want to become more family friendly, or co-create, as you were saying, a more family friendly culture, it has to start by this, by actively listening and having these conversations around this. I love what you are saying, Steve, because it resonates a lot with what we usually say to companies and to teams. But the thing that I like the most is the fact of having conversations, like unstructured conversations, maybe like this one or the ones that I know that you have in your podcast, or that we have in ours, that really what we are trying to convey is the importance of sharing thoughts, sharing opinions. And maybe on this conversation that we're having, maybe somebody who's listening to this right now, or who is going to watch the replay, they can find something of value. Not because we believe we are gurus, or we have the wisdom of the world, but maybe we can trigger some ideas or some knowledge that they can use for their own teams.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I think one of the things that we probably all three of us have experienced is when we have tried to use the mechanism or the methodology of design thinking as our first conversation into solving these problems. That's, I know for me personally, that's where it doesn't stick, as you said, Antonio. I think what we need to really focus on is what are the desired outcomes that we want to see. Oh, by the way, we have a really good framework to achieve those, but let's figure out what those desired outcomes are, so that in whatever they might be, it might be a family-friendly culture. How might we create a family-friendly culture? How might we create community? And I think beginning with those framing statements at the beginning, people understand that as like, here's our original intent. Some people may say, oh my gosh, that is a very big task. Our company, it's like, I'm not going to say Titanic, but it's a big ship. In order for us to make this change, it's like turning a big ship that is heavy, it's big, it's slow. And like, okay, let's not think of it as trying to turn the big ship. How about we actually launch one of those smaller boats out, and we have it actually go out there and try something new. And then if it works, have it come back to the big ship and say, hey, let's go and do this that we just learned in a small way. Why don't we try it? And I think sending out little boats like that, or little pilots, right? Pilot projects within our company, that you can experiment. And it's a way of experimenting with new ideas in a way that doesn't jeopardize the whole thing, because we still have companies to run. We still have customers to service. So I think being able to share with them that it's these pilot type of projects where we can try new things. And I think what I love about a book that is written by Scott D'Antoni, he talks about dual transformation, and that it's not only about transforming what exists, but it's also about creating something new at the same time. And that's where you start to see some changes. And part of that is actually changing how you measure success. I think even some of the KPIs or metrics that we have used pre-pandemic, maybe they're different today than they were 15 months ago.
Yeah,
As the police goes by.
It's okay. It's okay. Here we have noises as well. Yeah, and it has to do a lot with it again with mindset, again with trust. But what it seems to me that this time is very important and is crucial, and opens uh, you know uh, a very big window of opportunity. For example, for HR leaders, in order to build a strong business case, internal cases, in order you to to lead this transformation and innovation journey inside their organizations. And that the pandemic has increased the strategical role of HR leaders in that sense, because HR leaders have had to be innovative or to innovate in order to design or to decide how might we put the whole company remotely, and how might
Yeah.
we lead a back to office process, like very friendly and very safe, and those are very big challenges. No.
Well, I want to ask you on that comment, Alejandro, about HR leaders have been in many cases leading that conversation. What has been your observation for both of you in terms of, because HR leaders were leading that transformation? I kind of saw that after month 6 or 9 of this pandemic, that HR leaders were starting to burn out.
Yeah.
And starting to like, hey, we've been leading this charge. We're the ones that are trying to figure out everything. Yes, our executives may be part of it, but as far as actually doing the work of the on the ground change, it's been exhausting. What has been your observation of folks that you've talked to?
Yeah, for sure. They are really burnt out right now, and they are just, only like there are like two kinds of people: the ones that are still motivated because that, like the pandemic put them in a position of, under the spotlight. So it's like the chance of our lives to
Yeah.
really become strategic and to really become what we are meant to be. But the other ones who are just like in autopilot, just like trying
Yep.
to cruise all the way through the pandemic so that they can go back to normal. And the ones who are more motivated are the ones who are more burnt out. I see that they are the ones who are still looking for new ideas and still, trying to adapt the best practices or what they see in some other places and try to adapt it into their companies, into their cultures. But that's also why I believe this conversation was so important, because it's not about trying to mimic what it's working over there, but actually trying to change your mindset in terms of like the four things that the article says, like listening actively, creating community, respecting the roles, and ensuring that the people is getting the things done. So uh, if you get to implement those four strengths or four levers for implementing this culture, then I think things could be much better. And yeah, I agree with you. They are totally burnt out.
Yeah, yeah, it's been interesting to see, and it's interesting to hear your perspective that it's actually those who have been intentional and are championing this change that are the ones that are burnt out versus those who have been on cruise control and just kind of like, okay, CEO, if you want me to do this, I'll do it. But it does take, and that's one of the words, intentionality. That's one of the words that became very apparent to me throughout this whole thing, is that it's about intentionality. And I think to the fourth point in this article, as you mentioned, those that know how to trust their employees and colleagues are the ones that are going to rise to the top. I think that is something that I saw a lot of people, especially with creative companies who are responsible for individual contributors, say design agencies, architectural firms, things like that, that they generally, when they were in the office, they were looking over their shoulder to make sure that people got done. So when they came into the home, working from home, they could no longer do that. And it's like the anxiety level would go so high until they started to learn how to trust their folks. And I think if if employees felt that lack of trust, I think the culture did not do well. But if those that really leaned into really trusting their people, and I'm hoping, and I believe that trust has increased because leaders have seen that work can get done well, in some cases even better. And so I do think that trust has increased, and I hope that when we do go back into the office in whatever way, whether it's hybrid, 100%, 25%, whatever, that if we did learn how the value of trusting people, I hope that we maintain that.
Yeah, sure.
Well, thanks, Steve. It's been a really wonderful chat with you. I know that we have more spaces to talk to you. Just to a side comment, I have like a rule of thumb here. I usually pour two mezcals when I start this session, and then when the second one is about to finish, then
that's your
the
measurement.
conversation
Yes.
is also about to finish. So I know we could keep going with this subject and this conversation, but I'm also sure that we will have some other conversations in the future as well. So I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate your disposition and intentionality to be with us today. We know a lot about your generosity for these kind of spaces and sharing your knowledge. And just to wrap it up, just tell us where to find you and what are you into right now.
Yes, so people can find me on LinkedIn. It's Steve Chaparro. I am Chaparro. I'm only 5'6". I think so that does describe me well. And I'm cousins to Omar Chaparro. No, I wish. Maybe that's the case.
Maybe.
He does look like one of my uncles, though. I will say that. And he does come from Chihuahua, which I believe that's where my family comes from. So who knows? There may be some relation there. But folks can find me on LinkedIn. And also, if they want to go to stevechaparro.co/frustrated, I actually am offering people a 5-day free audio course for leaders, visionary leaders who sometimes get frustrated and want to learn how to transform those frustrations into foundations for change. So they can go to stevechaparro.co/frustrated.
Yeah, we love all of what you're doing and all this design mindset that really resonates with what we our book are doing. So thanks for being here. Ale, gracias por estar acá, gracias a quienes estén todavía conectados, gracias a quienes vean la repetición y pues solamente unos anuncios antes de retirarnos. El próximo 27 de mayo tendremos un webinar sobre Employee Journey Mapping. Es una de las técnicas que facilitamos como consultores y que hemos encontrado 3 secretos para mejorar el engagement con un Employee Journey Map. Entonces es el jueves 27 a las 5 de la tarde. Se pueden registrar en buca.mx/webinar. Y esta semana estrenamos un episodio muy importante de nuestro podcast HR Young Thinking, en donde Steve ha sido también invitado, con Alexandra Serrano, en donde hablamos sobre la importancia de caminar juntos como comunidad en recursos humanos y de experiencias de aprendizaje. Es un episodio que seguramente les va a gustar, así que lo pueden escuchar en cualquier plataforma. HR Young Thinking, búsquenlo, el podcast en cualquier plataforma. Por cierto, con Steve grabamos un episodio sobre el codiseño de culturas a partir de los principios de Design Thinking. Fue un episodio que si lo buscan y lo rascan ahí, es una joya que no se van a arrepentir. Y vaya que no olviden seguirnos en nuestras redes y estar al pendiente de lo que hacemos. Steve, just to prove that you are also fluent on Spanish, would you like to say something to end of this conversation?
Gracias a todos y especialmente a ustedes dos por esta oportunidad de estar con ustedes para platicar un poco de este tópico de family-centered cultures. Es un placer muy grandísimo para mí y gracias a ustedes y que tengan un buen fin de semana. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Steve. Salud, buen fin de semana. Ale, salud, buen fin de semana.
Thank you,
Tengan buen fin de semana. Todos nos vemos.
See you soon.
Ok, bye bye. Gracias.
Bye.